Hey, right, I'm still feeling a bit crap at the moment. I've had this cold for over 2 weeks and I just don't seem to be able to shake it. Now, first of all, I'm really glad that people like the sort of new format of my videos. It's something that I should have done a long time ago, sort of speaking to the camera. Everyone seems to appreciate it, and I think it's definitely the way forward with this channel, but I'm just not up to it at the moment. And I probably didn't do myself any favours standing outside in the freezing cold and rain for 3 hours on Monday recording Wednesday's video. So I thought I would try and make it easy for myself today. I'm just going to run some footage of a ride on the Shotgun 650. Well, I just ramble on really about motorcycle categories. Now, just imagine that we're sat in a pub having a chat over a pan, or depending on the time of day, in a coffee shop having a chat over a coffee. There's no need to rush to Wikipedia and then quote it back to me telling me that I'm wrong because Wikipedia says this or that. These are just my thoughts based on a couple of decades of reading books about motorcycle history, you know, during from the late 1970s through to the late 1990s, really, pre-internet days. Books written by historians or by guys that actually worked in the motorcycle industry from the early 19th century. They experienced it and saw its development through the years. And I have to admit, I don't really have any of those books or publications. Now, some were borrowed, others have been lost over many house moves over the years. I'm working mainly from memory. Now, what gave me the idea for this video is that I mentioned that the Shotgun was a roadster in a previous video. And a few people asked me what a roadster is because they hadn't heard the expression before. I mean, back when I started riding in the early 1980s, a motorcycle was just a motorcycle. There wasn't really a sports bike category. We had trials bikes and, you know, large capacity trail bikes were just starting to appear. Well, I say large capacity. The bike that springs to mind immediately, of course, is the Yamaha Tenere, which I don't know whether it was a 600 or a 650 at the time. That was considered large for a trail bike. Actually, I think it's pronounced Tenere, isn't it? But the thing is, that's not considered large for a trail bike anymore. Motorcycling is constantly evolving and changing. And there are more categories of motorcycle these days than you could shake a stick at. Commuters, roadsters, naked bikes, trials bikes, motocrossers, scramblers, trail bikes, adventure tourers, modern classics. I mean, the list is endless. But one thing that I can say for absolute certainty is all of those bikes have a lineage. They're all at the top of a family tree, and if you trace their bloodlines back to their origins, they all originate from a roadster. And my personal opinion is the roadster is actually the best bike that you can possibly have in your garage. Whether that be a contemporary modern roadster or a modern classic roadster, they are the most useful and versatile class of motorcycle in existence. Going back to the first decade of motorcycle, what we had were a load of madcap inventors and entrepreneurs working in garages and sheds, basically grafting some sort of proprietary made engine, usually a static single-cylinder engine designed for use as a water pump or generator. The Minerva engine springs to mind, into the frame of a bicycle. They were intended to be an extension of the Humble bicycle, something that a lot of people owned back in those days, but it gave them the ability to travel faster, further, cheaply. And these original bikes were designed to be used on the road to get around. They were roadsters. Very primitive, rudimentary motorcycles, low powered, usually 2 or 3 horsepower, And for the most part, they didn't even have a gearbox as such. Yet the pioneers of motorcycling, those early adopters of the motorcycle, toured all over the world on them. Now, for the most part, these machines were hand-built, and because they were hand-built in small numbers, they tended to be quite expensive. So, certainly up to the late 1930s, they were considered the preserve of the wealthier man. They were too expensive for your average man on the street. He had to be content with a pedal cycle. So these early bikes were leisure machines. They were an object of a man's hobby. And when you have a situation like that, the next thing that happens is the invention of some new motorsports. Motorcycle racing, endurance trials. And in order to sell more motorcycles, the manufacturers of the day took note of which motorcycles were winning and tried to outcompete them with more durable and faster machines. Now, these original races were run with the Humble Roadster. The original trials bikes were Humble Roadsters, but as owners made modifications to make those bikes perform faster, manufacturers noticed these modifications and started to incorporate them into new models. The trials bike and the racing bike appeared. Roadsters became faster and sportier, but there were still roadsters. Trials bikes, on the other hand, became more specialised. Speed wasn't important for a trials bike. Its ability to negotiate impossible terrain was the paramount objective. So it became less and less useful for road use as those modifications progressed. And then that category of motorcycle split again into, the trail bike, the scrambler, and later on the motocrosser. And the weird thing about it is that then back in the 1990s, it regressed and people in France started to take trail bikes and modifying them to be fast road bikes with the whole sort of super motard phenomenon. And then we had the adventure tourer. Actually, I think that sort of came along in the 1980s, a bit before the super motard. But you see what I mean? The whole thing just sort of exploded in all different directions. Manufacturers started creating motorcycles that were specialised in touring. And then came along the race replica scene of the early to mid 1980s, which eventually gave way to the sports bike categories. And then we had the sports tourer. Now, the mind boggles when you try to put all of it into context, but all of these bikes were derived from the Roadster. And virtually all motorcycle manufacturers still make a Roadster of one type or another. Now, different people have different definitions in the head as to what a roadster is. This is mine. A roadster is a basic standard configuration motorcycle with a sit-up and beg riding stance. That being the most comfortable, normal riding position for your average human being. It doesn't have a fairing. The engine is not enclosed, it's a naked bike in other words, and it has the capacity to carry the rider and a pillion. Now, that can be through a two-seater bench seat, or it could be through a split seat, the pillion pad of which could be removed, and it's designed primarily for a general purpose use on the road. Now, engine capacity is a bit of a moot point. I would say that a genuine roadster is anything from 100 cc's to around about 700, maybe 900 cc's. It can be anything from a single cylinder motor up to a 4-cylinder or multi-cylinder motor. It should be nimble with a sporty performance, not a super sports performance, a sporty performance, fast enough to be fun. But it must also be capable of used for touring. Now, I often hear of bikes like the Triumph Rocket or the BMW R19 being described as roadsters, but in my book they're not. They have gone beyond the sort of standard roadster category in my mind. They're too powerful, they're too big, and I would say that they've well and truly entered into the super sports category. I mean, they're just examples that I'm giving, but I personally think that any motorcycle that goes much beyond 70 or 80 brake horsepower is no longer a roadster. Because you're entering sort of performance motorcycle territory there, and that's not what a roadster is or what it's about. Now, I think where confusion often creeps in here is the difference between sporty performance and performance, high performance. A roadster is not a high performance machine. It's a roadster, a machine that's designed to be used on the road, so it must give sporty performance within the realms of what is acceptable or legal on the road. It's a measure of agility and nimbleness on hairpin bends, or the intricacies of negotiating urban traffic, urban conditions. A high-performance motorcycle, a sports bike or a super sports bike, is basically racetrack technology which has been put onto the road. It's not the same thing. It's not designed for the same environment as a roadster. It doesn't have the nimbleness or agility. In fact, my ideal is a power output of between sort of 12 and 50 brake horsepower. A motorcycle that, acquits itself well, and you're able to use all or most of the available power that it's able to produce. So that's that bit out of the way. What about touring? Right, for a start, you don't need a large capacity motorcycle for touring. I know I'm going to have all the Americans and Australians shouting at me that, it's got to be a big bike to tow. Now, this is a conversation that's been going on this channel since day one. Most Americans tell me that the speed limits on their highways are 70 miles an hour. Some tell me that it's 80 miles an hour, and if you can't travel at that speed, it's not safe. At the end of the day, that's just a matter of the individual's opinion, which I'm not going to get into in this video. People have towed the entire globe on 50cc machines. Plenty have done it on 125s. I've always advocated on this channel that touring is not about getting from A to B as fast as possible. That's just travelling, it's not touring. Touring is about exploration, it's about taking in the sights and enjoying the environment that you're in, not just blasting through it as fast as you possibly can. So a roadster, which is not a dedicated tourer, should be capable of touring, travelling at road legal speeds without any real issues, the ability to carry a pillion and whatever luggage is required, whether that be in soft panniers, hard panniers, rucksacks, shoulder bags, however you want to carry your luggage. Over long distances, it doesn't have to be quickly. Any standard roadster configuration should be capable of doing that. Now, in a way, a roadster is a jack of all trades and master of none. It doesn't constitute the best and most comfortable tourer on the road. It doesn't constitute the fastest, most high-performance motorcycle on the road. It's not an accomplished off-road machine because, that's not where it's meant to be used, although you can press them into service as an off-road machine, as I've demonstrated in the past, with about 60 kilograms of luggage strapped on the back, and I didn't fall off and it didn't break. So why is the Roadster the most useful motorcycle you can possibly have in your garage? Well, manufacturers all keep one or two or more Roadsters in their lineup of models for a reason. Basically, it's the two-wheeled equivalent of your average family car. And your average family cars are popular because they fulfill the requirements of your average person. They meet all the needs. You know, you can get the entire family into them. Alright, you can't on a Roadster, but, you know, a little bit of imagination here. They're the most affordable category of motor car. They're usually pretty good on fuel, which is, you know, foremost in a lot of customers' minds. Reasonable to insure. Perfect for getting you to the shops to do your weekly shopping. Perfect to get you to work every day. And then when it comes to the weekend or a bit of leisure time, perfect for a day out and perfect for a 2-week touring holiday in Wales or Scotland or wherever. There may well be other vehicles that are much more expensive that will do one of those tasks better than that average family car, but they won't do all of them better than that average family car. And that's what a Roadster motorcycle is. It's the most flexible and adaptable two-wheel vehicle that you can own. They're generally cheaper than the more specialised bikes. They're generally a lot simpler than your more specialised bikes, which means they're cheaper or easier to maintain. They're cheaper to insure, and by comparison, they sip fuel. Perfect for commuting to work and, you know, doing those daily errands that you need to do, which is 90 to 95% of the actual work that anybody puts a motorcycle to anyway. An absolute pleasure on those twists and turns of narrow country roads where a larger, more powerful bike can be a bit of a liability, whilst still being able to accomplish that 2-week touring holiday that you might take once a year. Don't get me wrong, I think it's great that we've got all these choices in specialist motorcycles, and I've tried most of them over the years, but the choice of motorcycle is a big investment for most of us. So easy to get that choice wrong. And the pragmatic purchase of a Humble Roadster often leads to a lifelong relationship rather than an adrenaline-fueled infatuation that only lasts for one season. The sheer adaptability and flexibility of the Humble Roadster, medium capacity or small, is what brought back the love of motorcycling for me. Roadsters have a lot of pros and very few cons, and the one con that does keep coming up with people is the lack of a screen and a fairing. But actually, that's the whole point of a Roadster. A motorcycle is about the sensation of travelling through the environment, and part of that sensation is the wind on your face and your body. And if you can't cope with that, you may as well just buy a car. Right, once again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this and my other videos, and in doing so, helping to support this channel. Please leave a like and subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. It does help the channel out. Now, if you want to help in other ways, you can do so via my Patreon page or via the Super Thanks button down below. Hopefully, I'm going to be feeling better next week. So until then, if you're riding, please ride safely, and I'll see you soon.